I'd like to now introduce our next set of panelists for the morning, who will guide us through a deeper conversation on state and local housing organizing. This panel will be moderated by fellow Coalition Board member Rachel Myers, who is the Executive Director of the Washington Low-Income Housing Alliance. Also joining the panel are going to be Kayla Jackson, who we just met, Randy Dillard of CASA, Steve Guade, President of CEO of National Coalition of Nonprofit Housing and Economic Development, based here in DC, and Sharon Cornu, consultant to the Nonprofit Housing Association of Northern California. Please welcome our panelists.
Thank you. Well, that was really inspirational, and you're about to get even more inspired. I was told that this portion of the forum was the inspirational portion. While we're all here in DC talking a lot about things that make us very scared and very worried and pushing back on things, there's also a lot of opportunities and incredible work and incredible victories happening around the country in local communities. So we're going to hear from some folks who have won some of those local victories today, talking about their campaigns. So with that, I'm going to get started. We're going to start with Randy Dillard from Community Action for Safe Apartments. But before we ask Randy some questions, we're going to show a video that's going to give you a little bit of a flavor of the work that his coalition has done. So are we ready with that video?
300,000 New Yorkers are brought to housing court every year to fight an eviction. Almost none of them have an attorney. 28,849 New York families were evicted last year.
More than half of them wouldn't have been evicted if they had had an attorney. We don't want this to be you. Let's work together so that this can't be you, me, or any of us.
At a time of heightened inequality, the tale of two cities play out in housing court like nowhere else. As New Yorkers, it's our job to fight inequality. The most important thing we can do is pass a law making it a right for tenants to have an attorney in housing court so that people can stay in their homes.
There is no law that provides for a right to counsel for tenants anywhere in the country. New York City could be the first to pass a law like this. New York could lead the nation.
65% of New Yorkers are renters. In 2013, landlords sued 246,864 tenants in court for eviction. 97% of all cases in housing court are initiated by landlords.
Less than 10% of tenants in housing court have lawyers to represent them. In 2013, 28,849 households were evicted by a marshal.
The vast majority of tenants facing eviction are women. Close to 40% of tenants in housing court represents families with children. At least 30% of people in the shelters went there right after being evicted.
57,000 people are in New York City shelter system right now. With few affordable housing options, the average length of shelter stay for families with children is up 10% to a record 375 days.
There are many consequences of eviction that we can't calculate, such as average storage costs, the number of days of work people miss because of court dates and move, the number of days children have to miss from school, and the mental and emotional stress of fighting and facing an eviction.
But we can calculate the impact of eviction on affordable housing. 52% of all tenants evicted last year were evicted from rent-stabilized apartments. After an eviction, rents in rent-stabilized apartments can legally be increased by at least 20%. We have an eviction crisis in New York City. This eviction crisis is also
a mental health crisis. The anxiety and stress of housing insecurity for so many New Yorkers cannot be underestimated.
A workers' rights crisis. The most vulnerable New Yorkers miss thousands of days of work.
A women's crisis! Women and children are being locked out of their homes.
A children's crisis. The effects of eviction on children are devastating.
A justice crisis. Every year more than half of all evictions could be prevented if tenants had attorneys.
A community crisis. Evictions destabilize our neighborhoods and communities.
An equity crisis.
Right now, we live in a city where you can stay in your home if you can afford an attorney. You lose that right if you cannot afford an attorney.
An immigrant crisis. Discrimination of language and national origin is rampant in housing courts. Undocumented immigrants are less likely to fight for their rights in housing courts and therefore more likely to be evicted.
Una crisis de vivienda asequible. Abrumadoramente, las y los inquilinos están siendo desahuciados y desahuciadas fuera de las opciones de vivienda más asequibles que tienen.
Una prueba de nuestras prioridades. En 10 años nadie estará pensando sobre cuánto nos cuesta financiar el derecho a la representación legal. Habremos sido devastadas y devastados por el costo de lo que esto significará para las y los residentes de Nueva York si no actuamos ahora.
Most of us live paycheck to paycheck, and unless you have 6 months to a year of household expenses saved up in the bank, we're all one paycheck from being homeless, especially without a right to counsel.
More than half of all the families that are evicted every year wouldn't be if they had an attorney. Shelter costs, rehousing costs, storage costs. Funding rights to counsel would save us money.
Right to counsel is an investment in our city's future. Right to counsel is a statement about our commitment to a diverse, equitable, and vibrant city.
Intro 214. Pass Intro 214. Intro 214. Pass Intro 214.
Well, I told you it was going to be inspiring. So Randy, congratulations, and Elena, congratulations again on this award for this really, really impressive campaign. This was a long campaign with the coalition starting in 2014. Can you talk to us about when and how you first got involved?
How I got involved, my landlord took me to court in 2012. Section 8 came into my apartment, they did an inspection, and my apartment did not pass the inspection. I got sick and I went to the hospital. I had COPD with emphysema. And I was in the hospital for 2 months, I almost died. So when I came out of the hospital, my doctor had put me on bed rest. The landlord's lawyer came and knocked on my door. My son answered the door. And I told him to come in, but he said he couldn't come in, and he served me papers. I'm a single parent with 4 sons and a daughter, 5 kids. After the landlord's lawyer handed me my papers, I tried to read them, but I couldn't read them because I couldn't understand it. My kids was looking at me after hearing what the landlords told me, that we're gonna have to be evicted. They was waiting to see what I would say to them for reinsurement. But I didn't have no words. I was numb at the time. But all I could say is that it's going to be all right. But thank God that God sits on the throne and watches over his own. The next day I called a friend and told him about my situation. He said, Randy, in your neighborhood, they have a nonprofit organization which is called POTS, Part of the Solution. He said, go down there, I think you will be able to get a lawyer. So I went down there and I spoke to an attorney and he took my case. But he didn't tell me that it was not my fault that the landlord was taking me to court. He just told me, we'll have another meeting and we'll review it. So when I came out of his office, there was a flyer on the desk, the reception desk, and it was a flyer from CASA, Community Action for Safe Apartments. And it had a workshop, Know Your Rights. So I went that following Saturday to that workshop. And I've been with CASA for 6 years, 4 years as a tenant leader and 2 years as a member. I was in court for 3 years. I lost my Section 8 because it was part of the violations that they stopped paying the landlord. The court system was a nightmare. My landlord was a police officer, he was a detective. My son had went to the gym and he's coming home and he got off the bus and he went between the cars to come into the apartment, and the police arrested him. They threw him on the ground, they handcuffed him, and they said that the cars along that area where he came between was being broken into. And then they charged him with assault on a police officer. But thank God that we have cameras in the area. And the cameras showed my son getting off the bus, walking between the cars, and coming to the apartment, and didn't engage the police officer with no type of harassment. So they let my son outside the side door of the courtroom. My daughter was a B student. When this started going on, she dropped the D's and F's. This is the effect that it has on family. And when a landlord has so much power as a police officer that he can harass your family. When I went to housing court, I didn't know what a holdover was. I didn't know what a stipulation was. I didn't know what an adjournment was. All these things only a lawyer know. So what we did, my attorney did, was told me, Randy, you do not owe rent. What the landlord should have did was took Section 8 to court. Because Section 8 is the one that owed the rent for the repairs that's done in my apartment. No one should have to live with no heat when you got to put water on the stove and your oven to heat your apartment. No tenant should have to go to the bathroom and hurry up and take a shower or do his business with the toilet when you're thinking that the ceiling is going to fall on you. No tenant should live with roaches and rats. No tenant should be able to enter into their building with a door with no locks on it. These are the conditions that me and my family lived under. These are the conditions that many New Yorkers live under. We have one landlord who is Chestnut Holdings, 85 units in New York, and all of them, it's the same conditions as my apartment. My daughter now has got 2.5 semesters of college. She's doing good. My son that was arrested, he's now in Local 79. He helped build the big buildings that you see in New York now. This is what comes from when you have an attorney. If I didn't have an attorney, I don't think I would have lasted in court for no 3 years.
Thank you. So you got involved because this was a very personal issue for you. Can you talk a little bit more about the role of low-income residents in general in the campaign? How were your voices included in the advocacy work to persuade elected officials to change this law?
Well, what we did, council, we partnered up with Urban Justice. We went into the courtroom and to see how they did things. We put out a report, which is a book called Tipping the Scales. And what we found out that 90% of the landlords had attorneys and about 15, maybe 20% of the tenants didn't. We also found out that tenants was going to mental hospitals behind being evicted. We found out that the Bronx had more than 11,000 evictions, more than any of the 5 boroughs. So what we did, we partnered up with Councilman Mark Levine and Councilman Vanessa Gibson, which is the co-sponsor of the bill, Intro 214. We took the tipping of the scales, and our organization did campaigns around the tipping of the scales to reform housing court. So what we did, we got them in housing court to put up the PowerPoints of how the court worked. We had them to put up IDs, so because tenants, when they come into court, they don't know who they're talking to. So we had everyone in the court to be able to wear IDs. So then we got with Andy Sherman, New York Law School, and we formed the coalition. The first thing we did after we formed the coalition, is that we put on a forum. At that forum, we had judges, we had tenants, we had lawyers. About 500 people attended that forum. We had media. So after that forum, we did town hall meetings in just about every borough. We had elected officials come to speak. We did community boards. Manhattan has 42 community boards. We went to them to sign on for the resolution. We also got all 5 borough presidents to sign on to the resolution. We got the public advocate to sign on to it. We got the controller to sign on to it. We called elected officials and we told them about the eviction rate in some of them's district. And we got 42 city councilmen to sign on to it.
Thank you. Congratulations again. We're going to hear some more about the effectiveness and the power of resident engagement before we're done here. But for the moment, I'm going to move on to Steve Glaudet from the Coalition for Nonprofit Housing and Economic Development here in Washington, D.C. So Steve, our award winners this year are being acknowledged for victories in renters' rights. You were honored in 2016 for winning new resources for developing affordable homes. Can you tell us a bit about the Housing for All work that earned you this honor in 2016?
So we needed resources because the real estate market in DC has just exploded. 15 years ago, a mayor and an education leader developed a 10-year vision for the city, which included bringing in 100,000 new residents over the next 10 years. We actually surpassed that. We got to 115. And they cataloged a lot of impacts that the new residents and the change in the city's economy would have. Their goals were to bring in the new residents, increase real estate values, balance the city budget, improve bond ratings and reserve funds, and they did all of that. They had some anticipation of how it would impact the rental market in DC and real estate costs overall, but they never imagined the explosion that occurred, nor did they have a comprehensive strategy to offset that. So a couple of the high-flying numbers, and there is what was a racial undertone that has now become an overlay in the impact on all of this. 48% of the residents in the district are rent burdened. A slightly less but alarming percentage are heavily rent burdened by definition. Right now, if you want to live in the district, if you graduate with a master's degree, you have to start your career making $80,000, and that's to share an efficiency with someone. So we needed resources. Although we work on rent control issues and other things, we needed an infusion of capital to produce and preserve affordable housing in the district. So our campaign was launched 9 years ago. It set out to do 3 things: increase public awareness about the affordable crisis in the district, build the political will to publicly invest, and get our trust fund to $100 million, which we've achieved 5 of the last 6 years. And so our organizing very much involves residents. We train and educate residents. We use, much like this gentleman just described his personal experience, we use those personal experiences in our council testimony. And I'm always amused because I usually testify side by side with 2 residents, and when the testimony's over, the council never asks me questions. They always ask the residents. They're actually smarter than I am when it comes to knowing the impact of the programs. One thing I will share about the campaign that I've learned is that you have to be really careful and precise in the work that you design, that you do. Because one thing I've learned about our campaign is every blessing is a curse. We are really victims of our own success. And so we alerted the city that there's a crisis. The city's response is great. Who can build big and fast? Well, it's not nonprofits who do wraparound services, who have ongoing relationships with the residents, who do other things to ensure that there's comprehensive community development. We have a trend of what I call drive-by developers who have shown up in DC to gobble up that $100 million. And we do have some mission-driven for-profits, But we have a whole lot of keys and leases being turned over to families without habilitations, and I'm concerned that we're incubating future foreclosures and future evictions. So we're going backwards. We're turning our face back into the wind to see how we get that comprehensive engagement going. The council and the mayor are now stuck on 100 million. When we set out to do 100 million, we were at 40. 100 million felt like a great, admirable, aspirational goal, but we've been there the last 4 years in a row, and I cannot get them off of $100 million, although the need is clearly demonstrated. So I would say that be careful in your messaging, because sometimes what starts off as an aspirational message becomes a bear trap in some other ways. When we do our next generation of campaign, we're going to make sure that we have a floating number attached to it so that we don't, I mean, we're proud of the 100 million and it's helping. The other thing that I would say the campaign's current shift of focus is how the 100 million is being sent. So 100 million is a great number. It's a good number. It's nowhere near need, but it leads the nation per capita as far as trust fund investments in the country. But now we have to focus on the targeting. Trust fund law says that 40% goes to 0 to 30 AMI, and 40% goes to 30 to 50, and then the other 20% goes to 50 to 80. If you look at our last couple of audits and our last few reports, last few years' reports, we've been less than 15% 0 to 30 AMI. So what was now a numbers game is now a targeting game for us to keep the campaign robust and going forward.
Thank you. They like those round numbers, don't they? 100 million's a good solid number. They can remember that. Congratulations. I'm going to move on. Oh, did you guys switch places? Very confused. Move on to Sharon Cornu with the Nonprofit Housing Association of Northern California, San Francisco. And speaking of generating dollars for affordable homes, you represented Nonprofit Housing Association of Northern California to receive last year's organizing award with allies from East Bay housing organizations. And you were largely being recognized for some incredible successes in ballot measure victories to fund affordable homes throughout the Bay Area. Because some of our attendees might not be familiar, can you talk a little bit more about that? The more than $2 billion that you and your partners won for affordable homes in California?
Great, thank you, Rachel, and it's terrific to be back with people, and I know we've got California in the house, right? Yeah. So last year, NPH was really honored to win the organizing award. We did 3 ballot measure campaigns that won $2 billion for new investment in affordable homes. Now that's California. I worked in Rhode Island for a long time. I understand scale, okay? It's a very big state. But let me tell you a little bit about what we won and then how we won it, because I think people are going to hear these same themes coming back from what Mr. Dillard has introduced about the power of resident voices and resident driving campaigns to the relationships with elected officials that you referenced. And so we were, California has a housing crisis. Who knew? And in the fall of 2015, San Francisco's mayor put a ballot measure on the ballot. Some of the folks in the room here from CHP and other organizations worked to pass that. Neighboring counties then noticed that housing ballot measures could pass and began that kind of sibling rivalry process of looking at what they could do in their communities. Alameda County and Santa Clara County went forward with $580 million and $950 million bond measures. San Mateo County did a sales tax extension which leveraged $44 million in the first 2 years. Sorry, allocated $44 million in the first 2 years. So those numbers are big. We ran competitive, professionally managed campaigns that had the resources to communicate with voters and made sure that we met California's high threshold. You have to get 2/3 to pass a new revenue measure in California. And so we were very fortunate to have the strong support of affordable housing developers to be able to fund those campaigns. But for the purposes of our conversation today, I really want to focus in on the resident leadership and the resident database that made it possible to meet those 2/3. We were able, with foundation support, to create a resident voter database, and there's some information in the tenant talk about this. Our partners at Housing California are now taking that resident voter database statewide, so we'll be able to see all of the registered voters in resident and residing in affordable homes will be able to work with resident services coordinators and teams to encourage nonprofit, nonpartisan voter registration, voter education, and turnout. And that'll be a terrific resource that will help elected officials see the powerful electoral bloc that exists in so many communities. The other piece, and I was remembering this so clearly while Mr. Dillard spoke, we had fabulous residents through the Resident United Network, through our network of affordable housing developers, through the East Bay Housing Organizations, step forward and share their stories and communicate directly with the elected officials who needed to put these measures on the ballot and with the public who needed to vote on them. And without that resident leadership, without those powerful stories, I don't think we would have overcome the pocketbook reticence, some of the shyness that voters feel around their wallet. But those powerful stories communicate so much more strongly than the statistics. Did you hear this room while Mr. Dillard spoke? You could hear a pin drop in here. But when we come up forward with statistics, we get into arguments about the numbers and how it was calculated, and is that this year or last year? And no one is going to argue with a parent about their child and providing a home for that family. So I really applaud the National Low Income Housing Coalition for continuing to highlight this important ballot work. The panel just before this, great work happening in Virginia, Minneapolis, Michigan, all across the country. We want to be a part of that. We want to learn from your success. We want to share a few things we've picked up along the way. We really see this coalition coming together to work at the local, state, and federal level to make sure that housing is a human right. Thank you.
Thank you. And we've got a video that showing that video later. Hold that thought. Can you talk a little bit, Sharon, about how winning housing funding at the ballot is different from making a case to elected officials? What makes it easier or harder or different?
Well, we've heard a couple good examples about working with the New York City Council and about the Washington, D.C. City Council. And your measure came through the St. Louis City Council and mayor. The electoral side is a little different because you have to get all of those people on board to put the measure on the ballot, and that's kind of the first election. And then you get to do it all over again to convince, well, in Santa Clara County we had 700,000 people who voted on the measure. So it's large, right? You have to get all of those folks engaged and understanding. And in the November 2016 presidential ballot, there was some voter suppression. Some people were turned off by some of the conversations that happened. Some folks sat it out. Interestingly, some folks, we had prepared people for voter drop-off, where people vote the top of the ticket but don't make it all the way down to their local races. But the reverse happened in November 2016. People were so upset about the ugliness at the top of the ticket that they skipped president and came down to the local races. Sometimes on the back of page 4 or page 6 of their ballot. We had some long ballots. But we had to highlight those local measures and the impact on the local community and really bring those stories home and show not just the problem, but a solution, and a solution that people could participate in by voting yes on Measure A, yes on Measure A1. So we had to get the city council members, county supervisors first, and then we also had to go out aggressively to voters.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to move on to Kalila Jackson now, who actually has been sitting next to me this whole time. It was down in the chairs down there that Sharon was next to me. You did not secretly switch spots. No, you're fine where you are. So Kalila, congratulations again for winning this award on this really successful campaign. Can you tell us where the idea for the campaign came from and how you got started?
Sure. Oh my gosh, okay. So by trade, I, unlike most of the other people on the panel, with maybe the exception of Randy, who I am in awe of, I am an attorney. So my organization, the Metropolitan St. Louis Equal Housing Opportunity Council, we primarily engage enforcement by litigating. That's what we do. And so the genesis of this particular initiative came from the work that we do on the ground. We are a direct service provider. We provide legal services at no charge to people in our community who need help. Our initiative towards evictions and eviction work started out of a desire to increase access to justice in minority communities and also to prevent homelessness in those same communities. So as part of my everyday work, I represent tenants who are being evicted in our version of housing court. And our housing court, particularly in the city of St. Louis, has an interesting dimension. It has a carve out where unrepresented landlords, or what we call pro se landlords, have a dedicated day on the docket. And so you may have 300 cases that go through on that one day where you have unrepresented landlords, unrepresented tenants. The rest of the week, you have landlord-tenant attorneys who are going through that same churn. And so one of the things that we were noticing was when we went in and we were representing clients in this pro se housing docket, we were getting calls from people who said that they were being evicted. Or we would see people and they would say they didn't get served. They didn't see any documents. They didn't, their landlord had just kind of shown up at their home. And so through a conversation with Legal Services of Eastern Missouri, we realized that there was a underground eviction problem. So the very first story that I remember, I represented a young lady. She was a mother of 4. She was 25 herself, and this was her first apartment. The home had no heat, and it was infested. And she had been talking to the landlord about her decision. She had just decided that she was going to move because she just was fed up. She couldn't take it anymore. And so the landlord came to her home. I think she told him earlier that week that she planned to move at the end of the month. The landlord came to her home while she was out grocery shopping, and she came back to an empty apartment. He had literally emptied out everything. And so she spent, at that time, she called the police. And the police came, they met her at the apartment, and they told her that this was a civil matter, that she would have to find an attorney. And so eventually she found her way to me, but that was 2 months later. It was 2 months later, so by that time, all of her children's toys, I remember at the time she had a 3-year-old, and his favorite truck, he couldn't find it. It was gone. And so he would cry about this truck. And so that's just one story, but it was story after story after story. So whether I'm talking about that or the woman who lost her medication or the woman whose son's remains, her cremated remains, were thrown out of the apartment. Or we're talking about people whose landlords put boots on their doors who said, if you do not pay me X number of dollars, we're not going to let you back into their apartment. So people go take out payday loans that they can't afford to then try to pay this ransom note, in essence, just so that they can get back into their homes. And so from that conversation, what we saw, the person that I was working with at Legal Services is also an attorney. And so what we realized is that we couldn't go into court, and I did, and I do go into court, and I do make landlords that illegally evict people pay their money back. But what we realized is that litigation was insufficient to meet the need, because what it didn't do is give that 3-year-old back his favorite truck. What it didn't do is give that woman, give her son's remains back to her. We couldn't do that litigating after the fact, and there are some harms that really cannot be remediated with dollars. And so from that conversation, because as Sharon alluded to, and even as Steve talked about, I am not a professional organizer. We did not have a professional campaign. What I had was a sense of wrong and a knowledge that something had to be done and no one else was doing it.
That is a campaign, by the way. Every campaign starts with those three things.
And that's all I had. So I think went to a panel earlier this morning, and that's all we had. All we had was the knowledge that something bad was happening in our community, something that our particular profession was inadequately equipped to address, and a desire to do something different. And so from my perspective, what I'd like to emphasize is some of you, I know a lot of you in this room are professional organizers, are professional policy wonks, and who understand the ins and outs, but maybe there's some in this room who aren't. And so I'm here to speak to those people and to kind of talk about how it's possible to do something like this even if you don't have the knowledge right at your fingertips at that moment, and how it's possible to get started even if it feels like you're walking in the dark, because that's how I felt when I started this campaign.
Well, that all you had was obviously enough. Congratulations. So all of you have won really amazing campaigns that are changing people's lives, but they've also galvanized people and motivated people. You know, one of the things about organizing is that when you have a win, you realize that you can be powerful. So let's take a few minutes before we wrap up and talk about turning some of that energy towards Congress, towards changes at the federal level, and talk a little bit about the National Week of Action. We're going to start with a video that the National Low-Income Housing Coalition has created for that. So can we cue that second video?
Affordable housing should be a basic human right. Thank you for your service. I will continue to stand with you. I will continue to do what this t-shirt represents. And you know why? Because I'm Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, and I approve this message. God bless you.
We must make a bold and sustained commitment to ensure that everyone has a safe, accessible, and affordable home.
That music's going to be stuck in my head for a little while. Thank you, NLIHC. So, Steve, you guys were involved in this last year in the first ever National Week of Action, and you had a really great tweet storm during the Our Homes, Our Voices week. I'm not saying this right. During the Our Homes, Our Voices National Week of Action. What kind of an impact do you think can be achieved through having residents share their stories like that on social media?
I think it's really important, and you probably heard this in parts of the conference I haven't been to, but I think it's really important to recognize, and I know that you do, but it's worth saying again, the moment that we're in. And so normally these moments are about local action, they're about educating and informing and holding accountable your local members, your state members, as they play a few miles from, well, actually a few blocks from here on the Hill. I think that we're in a different moment. We got to put some arrows through some people's hearts because the messaging has drifted away from us. So I think residents do play a great role, but I think we're in a heightened moment of action. We have to take back control of our politics in this city, and we need to be very clear about that. And I really want to do a plug for the Low Income Housing Coalition. I'm a little off subject. I'm going to come back real quick and wrap it up. For the Low Income Housing Coalition and the National Coalition for the Homeless and our national organizations. When community development block grants are a threat, 18 national organizations link arms to save that funding. The Conference of Mayors, the League of Cities, the Governors Association, the state legislature. We don't have as rich a robust network of national organizations, so thank God for the Low Income Housing Coalition, because I thought you were going to ask me, what are we going to do this week? And I was going to say whatever you all tell us to do, because we follow your lead. But the idea of getting residents involved, and when the Low Income Housing Coalition says go to the Hill, you know, we always get the information out, and then I look at the news that night and I go, oh God, there's some of my yellow shirts. The residents have shown up on the Hill, and as they will march through the halls of Congress. I think that, I want to say there was a time when I think that our elected officials hearing these stories was enough. I don't think it is right now. I think it's got to be more. I think we've got to go from empathy to threat, and I just want to be transparent and clear about that. We need to put in some arrows through a few people's hearts, because I think that's the only thing that's going to turn the ship back in our direction. Just keep it at 100.
I agree with that 100. So, do you have any plans that you want to share for how you're going to participate this year?
Is Westa here? Westa, where are you? She's in the back. So, what are we doing? Westa is our director of advocacy, runs our campaign and our resident organizing.
I think right now what we were attempting to do was to start kicking things off with our own personal advocacy day here in DC to try and engage residents to come in to talk to their council members and get some, strategize about housing programs and the trust fund, and that was supposed to happen the week of the Our Homes, Our Voices, and so I think that was our approach.
And then we'll pivot to national participation. I'm actually, as a local organizing entity, very comfortable with actually working with the Low Income Housing Coalition and asking them what they think will be effective. So when I jokingly say we'll do what you tell us to do, we'll do what you tell us to do.
Everybody else can make that pledge right now, right here. And there's a lot of ways that you can participate in this week. You know, tweet storms and events and rallies. So Kalila, I'm gonna ask you, in a city like St. Louis, where there have been so many large demonstrations and actions over the past several years, what makes an event stand out? And what advice would you give to advocates here who are trying to make housing issues get attention in their communities?
Well, I mean, it's nothing that you guys don't already know. I think one of the most important things is that you stay grounded in the community, and if at all possible, the community should be driving whatever action it is that you're taking. So it's being able to be responsive to the needs, being responsive to what issues folks are actually having, and then empowering them to participate. And so, for example, I'm also a member of the National Lawyers Guild, and I was just elected to their local board in St. Louis. And so for us, what I've really seen is if you are actually, I'm going to quote Steve, if you keep it 100, people will gravitate to that message. They will gravitate to you. So if they feel that you are genuine and you are listening and you are there to try to meet their needs and you are willing to meet people where they are, and you are thoughtful about your organizing, so being transparent is number one, I found, and then also making sure that you're being supportive, so being able to provide things like transportation. In a city like St. Louis, where we don't have a mass public transit system that works as effectively as some of you are, maybe from major cities, so we have to come in and provide transportation, childcare, meals sometimes, and so that people really are able to come out and engage. And then also, for me, I also believe access to justice is also a great thing, so we also try to partner with other local social service agencies, lawyers, other groups to have those folks available at community meetings so that people can have those larger questions answered too in those forums. So to not only educate, but to provide something back to the community that's provided so much to us.
Thank you. So let's see an example now. We do have Sharon's video to see an example of how one organization participated.
We're here in the San Francisco Federal Building. This delegation is going up into the offices of Leader Nancy Pelosi to present a thumb drive with signatures and really important comments about the proposed cuts to the HUD budget.
Just opened last year. We have a Section 8 senior building that houses 110 seniors in Chinatown. And last year we opened our waitlist for the first time in 10 years. We had over 5,000 applicants.
We estimate that more than 5,000 people are at immediate risk of homelessness if those cuts go through in terms of the loss of vouchers.
Yeah, so there's a lot of uncertainty, but we're here to hear you.
We are well aware of the issue there. We heard people who are on the wait list for years and years and years and still have not heard back.
But we want to make sure to continue doing what we can to support what it is that you're doing.
This convening today was incredibly important to show our leaders that run our district how important it is for them to stay engaged with community stakeholders that are doing the work.
I think we were very successful at communicating to them how much we appreciate Pelosi's leadership and need her to continue fighting to protect the critical HUD and USDA affordable housing programs.
These cuts could mean up to 3,000 individuals in Santa Clara County losing their housing choice vouchers. And we can't afford this.
Because of the Congresswoman's extraordinary leadership, we needed to be at this meeting and need to encourage her to continue to champion housing.
I think this is so important because San Francisco has been leading the affordable housing movement in California and the nation for the past 4 decades, and we need to continue to be a strong leader in fighting for the affordable housing that we need.
Thank you. Sharon, thanks for that video. It's clear that your participation in the Week of Action wasn't in one of the most obvious ways, like doing a big rally or teach-in. Can you talk about how NPH decided to participate in this way and what made it effective?
Absolutely, and let's stick with the theme of keeping it 100, okay? Because truthfully, we were in the middle of our legislative session, and our resident mobilization work was focused on state legislation and what became a package of 15 housing bills, and that work needed to continue going. We also had, and this is just us here, so we had some specific organizational needs. We were in the middle of a transition to a new email database, and it wasn't moving very quickly or very well. Yeah, other people have had that experience. And so, thank you. When the call came from the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, of course we were going to participate, but we used the dates as an artificial deadline to make us get moving on this stupid database. And we set up an online petition. We collected 1,100 signatures on that petition. The wonderful communications director, Alina Harvey, who made that video on an iPhone, set up the online petition so it captured stories. And so what we presented to the Congresswoman's staff was excerpts of those stories to keep with the point of the power of storytelling and the power of narrative. We also had a number, you see the wonderful young women in this video, and we took it as an opportunity to do some leadership development. And they were, like so many people, oh, I couldn't do it. You can't ask me, I wouldn't possibly do that. I mean, I can come, but I wouldn't talk. Oh, I don't know, right? And so we just got out there, and Alina stuck the phone in their face and made them talk. And they had a great time, and they talked to everybody about it, and they continued circulating the petition afterwards. So we took a deficit. We don't think we can do a big rally. We've got a lot of other stuff going on, and we looked at assets and what did we have and how can we use them and how can we fit this into our work. And I just want to echo Steve's comments. I really think that our participation in the National Low Income Housing Coalition has made us stronger in our local work, has given us opportunities to partner with our state organization, Housing California, more directly, and makes us part of a national movement. So when the call comes down, hell yeah, we got to be there. It's not an option. And we'll be there and find a way to do it so that we get more public support and more political will for all of the important work that everybody's doing.
Can I just, one thing real quick.
Take a minute.
Everybody, it'll be 1 minute. I noticed from her film, I noticed from DC, and I've noticed from other cities, that the best campaigns come from the worst real estate market cities in the country. And you know, I don't know that we should be okay with that trend. I think we need to develop robust campaigns before our cities come in crisis. We started 8 years too late in DC, and so the Low Income Housing Coalition is a great resource to help you get your campaign before your market becomes out of control. We are chasing a car downhill on foot, and it has no stop signs and no stop lights. You know, if we are honest with ourselves, catching it is going to be an immaculate or impossible task. So I would just say, you know, when I saw your film, I said, San Francisco, robust, one of the toughest markets. Don't wait till your market becomes out of control before you ramp up your campaign as high as you can.
Thank you, thank you. And thank you so much to all of our panelists. We are out of time for questions, and I know you're all getting hungry. I assume that you'll all be around for lunch. No, or most of you will be around for lunch. So if you've got questions for the panelists, please find them and ask them. I hope it's okay that I'm making that offer. Thank you all so much, and thank you again. Please, one more round of applause for our great panel.